Okay, good evening, everyone. I want to welcome you to the third and final workshop in the education series. It has been my pleasure the last several Tuesday evenings to visit with you, to come into your homes virtually, and to cover information that's of vital importance to our special needs community. I see we still have one or two joining us, so we'll do a bit of an introduction here for about another minute, and then we'll go to the slides. The first workshop focused on government benefits, and so we did a deep dive into Social Security, SSI, SSDI, adult child benefits, the importance of understanding what the guidelines are and staying on the eligible side of things, such things as SGA for substantial gainful activity limit, $13.10 per month for this year. The total overall income limit of $2,382 to maintain Medicaid eligibility. So a lot of information on government benefits. And then in last week's session, we focused on guardianship as well as alternatives to guardianship, and then also ABLE accounts and enhancements that have been made to ABLE accounts. And there are more enhancements coming. I would be surprised if by next year, 2022, we don't see the age of 26 go up and the ABLE accounts be available to a larger group of our special needs population. So stay tuned for more on ABLE. And in fact, if Jeff and his wonderful team, including Francie Smith, who's on with us this evening and has been so faithful over the last several weeks, once we can repeat this at some point in the future. It certainly is convenient to make it available statewide without people having to drive everywhere and that type of thing. So I'm certainly open to doing that. And Jeff and I'll have to have lunch at some point and talk about what we may want to consider for 2022. With that in mind, your feedback is really valuable, really important. And so if by the time we finish tonight, and I realize I've got this evening yet to go, but if by the time we finish this evening, you truly feel that the information has been helpful, the time has been well spent, and it has added value to your Special Olympics experience, then please don't be shy to share with your county coordinator, your regional and territorial director, or Jeff, the executive director, because they value your input and things that are repeated, done again, or things that are considered. It has a lot to do with what makes a difference for you. So that'd be a great way to make sure that we can come back to these and update as we move forward. So this evening we are focused on special needs trusts. And lest you think you have heard everything there is to know about special needs trusts, I certainly do not plan to disappoint you. You may be surprised to know that there are about a half a dozen different types of special needs trusts. And it has to do with whose money and what kind of money and whether it's assets or income or that type of thing. So there's a lot more to special needs trusts than most people realize. And it has evolved. It didn't start out this way close to 30 years ago, but like so many things, it has evolved as we have moved forward. And so I really hope that you enjoy what will this evening be really a unique opportunity to both understand the history of special needs trusts and the different types of special needs trusts and the impact that they can have both on your family member with special needs and the family overall. Now, no discussion would be complete without questions. And so with me this evening, I want to also remind you, we've got Jamie here, Jamie Sturchy, and she is our parent advocate and relationship coordinator. And I'm so thankful for her. She helps maintain our relationships with the many nonprofit partners that we work with, such as the great organization of Special Olympics Indiana. And Jamie is the one that's been responsible for getting out your pre-meeting and post-meeting emails. And so we're very thankful for that, with your pages to take notes on and so forth. There will be a post-workshop email that comes out, I think, on Thursday. And but because this is the third and final edition, then you may not be hearing from Jamie again for a little while. But I want to encourage you to take advantage of the free follow-up consultation that we're providing as a part of your participation, because having knowledge is one thing, but putting it to use is even more important. And we want to make sure that what we talk about and cover in these workshops is put to good use, not a woulda, shoulda, coulda, but what we actually are able to do to help your family and your dependent with special needs. There's absolutely no cost, no obligation, and we typically set aside anywhere from an hour to an hour and a half for each family. We can do it in person in our offices in Indianapolis and Louisville. We are welcoming families back into the office, or if it's more convenient, then certainly we will do it by Zoom like we're doing the workshop this evening. So please don't let busyness or distractions get in the way of taking full advantage of what this series provides you, including the free consultation. The free consultation is easy as responding to any of the emails that you've received from Jamie. And in addition to that, my contact information will be at the end of the PowerPoint as usual. I think Jamie has been so kind to enter her email address into the chat box already. And so it's easily accessible by everyone by going there. As far as questions this evening are concerned, Special Needs Trust is fairly complex material and information. And so I'm thinking there may be value in asking your questions as we go along, so that we have the particular slide or slides up that apply to what we're talking about versus jumping back and forth from beginning to end, et cetera. So I don't always, but this evening I'm going to invite you to unmute yourself if you have a question, and please don't be shy, because if I get questions about all 5 or 6 different types of special needs trusts all at the end, it's going to get very confusing. So, so please do feel free to jump in. Questions also oftentimes help remind me of perhaps what it might have been better to have covered or what may have been left out, et cetera. And so you add tremendous value by participating in that way. So many thanks in advance for anyone that does want to ask a question. We've said hello to Jamie, and you know me, Gordon Holmes, and we've thanked Special Olympics Indiana, Jeff Mueller and team, and again, Francie with us this evening. What a blessing we have here in Indiana, such great organizations like Special Olympics Indiana. At this point, I'm going to go to screen share and bring up the PowerPoint. So hopefully we keep everybody as I do that. And here we go. And if I can have a nod or an ear pull or something, okay, wonderful, thank you. And we will go to the slides on special needs trusts. And boy, doesn't the title provide a great summary, providing lifetime care and quality of life. The government, as we remember from the session a few weeks ago, focuses on food, shelter, and healthcare. It is not the government's concern to uphold the quality of life. And so where the government, in essence, leaves off, families like mine and like yours pick up and carry forward. And while parents, or in some cases siblings, are here, we're picking up the slack, making up the difference and doing things to enhance their quality of life. But inherently, there is a concern. And the concern is as they outlive us, as the life expectancy for many individuals with special needs is now well into the 70s, as they outlive us, how do our good works continue? How does their quality of life continue to be upheld? And special needs trusts play a pivotal role in answering that question. Of course, important disclosures. We're not all things to all people, as you've seen before. And there is a disclosure with regards to the MassMutual Trust Company, which can serve as a trustee of special needs trusts. Special Care is the division of MetLife, or excuse me, that was a Freudian slip, of MassMutual, as I am plugged into. And Special Care focuses on helping families all over the country. I'm one of a network of several hundred specially trained advisors working in our own respective special needs communities. My primary focus is the entire state of Indiana and most of the state of Kentucky. So we as special care planners, in case you're curious, we focus on the legal, the financial, the government benefits, integrity, honesty, teamwork, respect. We try to help families get connected with other families, get connected with benefits, and to help make informed decisions about planning for the future of their loved one with special needs. So there are 10 comprehensive life care planning steps involved in the special needs planning process, addressing primary issues such as healthcare, education, government services, creating a life care plan vision, how you see the future, addressing guardianship and or alternatives to guardianship, such as executing a durable power of attorney, healthcare directive, et cetera. And then identifying financial resources, very, very important. Try to make certain that all opportunities for help are available and you have access to them. Preparing for life care plan costs. And that came up in a meeting yesterday. In fact, I spoke to a national conference and this issue of how much is enough came up. Preparing a letter of intent, which is a caregiver guide, an owner's manual, detailed information that you want for a future guardian or caregiver if you're not there. And preparing legal documents and legal instruments, such as estate plans or the need for appealing a government benefit decision, such as being turned down for Social Security or having Social Security removed seemingly inappropriately. We have a network of attorneys throughout Indiana and Kentucky. And so we're in a unique position to assist people in getting connected with appropriate legal counsel for your special needs concern. The need to review an existing special needs trust or ABLE account, and an opportunity for me to mention that the free follow-up consultations certainly is not limited to families that have not planned. It's also for families that have planned but need to revisit the plan that was in place. And in fact, just earlier this afternoon, I had a family in that I assisted several years ago. And sure enough, as is nearly always the case, when we get together for review, we realize things that need to be updated or areas that need attention. And so even if you have already planned, please take advantage of the follow-up consultation so that we can figure out what type of trust, what type of special needs trust perhaps that you have via our discussion this evening, because a lot of people are surprised to learn they perhaps do not have the optimal trust for their situation. Holding a family meeting, the importance of including family, and again, the importance of reviewing. So why a special needs trust? Well, let's go back to when special needs trust basically first came about, which primarily is in the 90s. The OBRA 93, the Omnibus Budget Reconciliation Act of 1993 brought about special needs trust. So we're talking 28 years ago. And you may be wondering, why 28 years ago? What was magical about the early 90s? Well, the decade of the 80s was primarily the decade when options for institutional care started being shuttered and reapportioned to other purposes, and Medicaid waivers were born and started. And basically the objective was to, instead of housing individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities in an institutional setting, to keep them in the home and community, invest in them through IEPs, 504s, First Steps, special needs preschool, and the list goes on, VOC rehab, et cetera. And so all of these things have not been around forever. All of these are a measured approach to assisting individuals with special needs to be all that they can be, to engage both with others and their communities, and to actually have a focus on quality of life. And so this has contributed substantially to these increased life expectancies. I mean, within my lifetime, the life expectancy for someone with Down syndrome was age 30. It's just shocking to even think about that today, with individuals with Down syndrome living into their 70s now. So what are the reasons? Developmental disabilities, congenital disabilities, traumatic brain injury, or spinal cord injury. medical malpractice, personal injury liability, manufacturer liability. All of these are liability type of situations that typically involve settlements, structured settlements, inheritance, gifts, Medicaid and or SSI eligibility issues relating to income or resources. So the answer to the question, there's lots of reasons for special needs trusts. So two primary types of government benefits. One type of government benefits, pension insurance type, such as Social Security, disability, and Medicare. The government's not quite as much in your business, and it's okay to have assets and resources. Then you have the other type of government benefits, we sometimes refer to as public benefits. And these type of benefits, the government is in your business. Supplemental Security Income, or SSI, typically paid to a representative payee account that Social Security monitors every month, and Medicaid, where you have resource issues, limitations, etc. So usually most people start out, not all, but most people start out with government benefit type number 2, either SSI for a young person, Medicaid waiver, this type of thing, which comes, of course, with Medicaid. And then in time, elements from number 1, the first category we see there, are added in with adult child benefits, disabled Social Security disability benefits, Medicare, et cetera. And usually in the final analysis, it ends up being a combination of both. So as a result of that, there are restrictions and guidelines that need to be maintained so that we keep the government, as I call it, doing as much heavy lifting as possible. So we have a few do you knows or did you knows here. And the first is individuals with special needs who may qualify for both Medicaid and supplemental security income may not receive these government benefits if their assets exceed $2,000. So what assets are we talking about? Well, we're talking about certainly the most obvious, checking, savings, that type of thing. We're talking about cash or cash equivalents. We're also talking about investment accounts. It can even be a retirement account from a prior employer. UTMA, or Uniform Transfer to Minor Act accounts, custodial accounts, joint accounts with perhaps a guardian or a family member. All of these the government seeks to count as what we call an available resource. And again, the limit is 2,000. 2,000 is specific to SSI and to Medicaid. So even if one is receiving SSDI or Social Security disability income and not SSI, if they have Medicaid and or Medicaid waiver services, they need to stay under the $2,000. So this is really important. If you get above $2,000, at a minimum for SSI, you've created a period of ineligibility and they want the money back. In the case of Medicaid, they do typically send out annual statements to complete, this type of thing. Once they learn that assets or resources are north of $2,000, you will also find Medicaid benefits withdrawn. So a strategy is to place the assets, including inheritances, gifts received, life insurance proceeds, etc., in a carefully drafted special needs trust. We'll talk a little this evening about the difference between ABLE accounts and special needs trusts, because most of the time it's not either or, but both can be useful or helpful in certain situations. Special needs trust assets typically supplement the needs of your dependent and will not jeopardize a beneficiary's eligibility for needs-based government assistance, such as Medicaid and SSI. If it's properly established and administered within a certain trust arrangement, it's just not going to hurt them. It's not going to undermine their continued eligibility for these benefits. You should work with an attorney that is familiar with special needs trusts, with special needs and creating special needs trusts. So it's not an area for novices. It's something you really want somebody that knows what they're doing. That's why I've worked very hard over the last 20 plus years to cultivate relationships with the very best special needs attorneys throughout the state. So here we have OBRA 93, OBRA, the Omnibus Budget Reconciliation Act of 93. And actually, a big part of this act was about how you can't give money away and qualify for Medicaid. So you may wonder, then how did it help us? Well, the answer is there was a carve out. So there was an exception made in this legislation from 1993 for situations that involve us. And so it initially it limits the ability of individuals to transfer their own assets to others in order to qualify for Medicaid. But the exception, called a Medicaid Payback Trust, AKA or otherwise known as a first party trust, was born with OBRA 93. And this allows an individual to receive funds in certain types of trusts while still receiving needs-based benefits, such as the Medicaid waivers, and SSI. We will talk about the differences in the special needs trust as we move forward, but right now we're looking at a first party trust. And this actually is probably a trust that most of you will never have or set up for your child with special needs. But we'll talk about the different trusts. But this is where it started. This was history in the making. So what is a special needs trust? A means of enhancing an individual's quality of life beyond the basic food, shelter, and healthcare provided by government benefits. It can be set up to send a dependent with special needs to camp, take vacations, travel to visit relatives, buy sports equipment, pursue education, such as job or technical training, college, or to pay for other therapeutic needs that do not fall under the day-to-day living or maintenance expenses, dental care, purchase of a home or condominium, furniture, clothing, personal items, entertainment. I mean, we could just go on and on. There are all kinds of things that a special needs trust can pay for. And part of what it can pay for depends upon what government benefits are in the mix. If properly drafted, proceeds placed in the trust will not affect government benefits, as funds held by a special needs trust are not considered those of the trust beneficiary. So it's a trust for their benefit, but it's not a trust that they personally own. It's not their personal asset. Therefore, it does not count against them. If you're curious, there is no maximum as to how much can be in a special needs trust. I've seen many trusts with deposits in excess of $1 million. And these are trust beneficiaries who are receiving the full array of government benefits, Medicaid, waiver services, et cetera. So no maximum as to what could be placed in a special needs trust. I want to invite again anyone that has a question as we're moving through. Feel free to unmute and jump in. Who should establish a special needs trust? So we talked a little bit ago about why to establish one, now the who. And caregivers or donors can establish a third-party special needs trust. A caregiver may be a parent. A donor may be a grandparent. Sometimes it's the grandparents that have the money, shall we say. So, but either can establish a third-party special needs trust. Notice we had first-party special needs trust up on the screen a moment ago. Now we're switching gears and talking about third-party, an example of the different types of special needs trusts. And this third-party special needs trust can be set up for a child, a sibling, or a loved one who is disabled. And we've assisted families in doing it all. I've assisted thousands of parents in setting up special needs trusts. I have assisted a number of siblings in doing the same. Sometimes it is a godparent or friend. So at any rate, there's not much of a limitation as to who can establish a third-party special needs trust for an individual with a disability. So literally, if there is a close family friend who has the resources to do so, they can set up a trust for your son or your daughter with special needs and fund it for them. Anyone who asks the question or questions, who will take care of them when I'm not around? And how can I pass on a part of my estate without affecting their government benefits? So as an example, I have 3 kids, and some of you may be on this evening that have 4 or 5 kids. But, you know, we look at our kids, we love them, we frequently want to treat them the same, and we don't want to disenfranchise our child with special needs. So if there are 3 like me, we're thinking a third to each child. But it's disconcerting that if a third is left to the child with special needs, we may undermine these government benefits that are worth hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars over their lifetime. And so a knee-jerk reaction traditionally decades ago was to disinherit them. I still see this. In fact, I was on a meeting today where the parent had done just that. They were going out of town and felt like they had to get something put together. And so the quick and easy was to simply cut them out of everything. And that's traditionally the way it was done. Siblings were morally and financially obligated to do the right thing for their child with special, or their sibling with special needs, excuse me. And it didn't always end up that way, as you could imagine. So Special Needs Trust came about, and it created an opportunity for you to set aside the funds that are for the share for your child with special needs. And again, they get to keep their benefits. So coordinate available resources, ensure continuation of government benefits, and set up a special needs trust to provide supplemental needs for life. That means the extras, all the things that give people something to look forward to, something to enjoy, to help fill their time, improve quality of life, and to direct final distributions. Final distributions mean distributions made typically upon the death of the trust beneficiary. So how does a special needs trust work? The trust document itself stipulates how the monies contributed to the trust are used for the beneficiary. State-specific language is necessary, and names a trustee who is responsible to carry out the terms of the trust agreement. The trustee is obligated to act both in accordance with these provisions and in the interest of the trust beneficiary. So there is infrastructure involved here, and there is both a moral and a legal obligation. So if you have a trust in place, it is not subject to whoever's holding the money as to whether they will help your child with special needs or not. They have a fiduciary and a legal obligation to act, and they must follow the terms of the trust. So the funds are protected, and the interest of your family member with special needs is upheld. There are many ways that special needs trust can be created to fit the needs of the family. And again, at the bottom, the importance of involving an attorney that knows their stuff with special needs. Okay, so we're going to now dive into these different parts of, or different types of special needs trusts. And you see listed first party, self-settled. We will talk about the Special Needs Trust Fairness Act, third party special needs trusts, qualified disability trusts, pooled special needs trust, and Miller trusts. Lots of trusts. And by the way, a person can have more than one. In some situations, really require more than one trust. It just depends. These do not all do the same thing. They're not all for the same assets. They are almost like instruments in the symphony. You wouldn't want to have one instrument attempting to play all the parts. And in some cases, we need more than one trust. So we'll start off with first party trusts or Medicaid payback trusts, which is to a certain degree where all this began, because that was what was a part of the OBRA 93 legislation. So self-settled trusts typically are funded by monies belonging to or being received by the trust beneficiary. So that means this is usually not for money belonging to someone else. This is money belonging to the trust beneficiary. So how would they have money? So the answer is they might get a settlement. That is, there might be a litigation. Perhaps the event that created the liability caused the disability to begin with. I know of many of these situations because of my many years of working in special needs and assisting families going through these traumatic events, whether it's someone being abused at camp, or it is someone whose wheelchair isn't anchored and they roll out of a school bus and face plant on the asphalt, whether it is a motor vehicle with an electrical issue that eventually the manufacturer does a recall on, but in the meantime, a window goes up on a young girl hanging out the window playing like mom and she can't breathe, and has brain damage. And the plumber that put in a new hot water heater and thought he or she was doing a great job, but failed to test the temperature. And then the non-ambulatory child with special needs is rolled into the shower to have the honor of the inaugural shower with the new hot water heater to only be scalded and to have multiple surgeries and skin grafts. Again, so many situations over the years that I've been a part of, and sometimes gut-wrenching, but of course, we're there to try to be helpful in every way that we can. No doubt litigation follows all of these events and situations. And those settlements, unfortunately, can undermine eligibility for government benefits that may be critically important. And so those funds belong to the individual with a disability. They're the ones that sustain the injury. And therefore the funds are theirs, but the funds being theirs then, of course, undermines benefit eligibility. So that's an example of where first party or Medicaid payback trusts are so often used. Also, let's say that you've got a great aunt or uncle and you had no idea, but they passed away and they had lots of money. Who would have thought it? And they decided to sprinkle this money among all their great nieces and nephews. Maybe they had no children of their own. And so here comes a $20,000 inheritance for your child with special needs. And that blows way past the $15,000 available for an ABLE account, and certainly way past the $2,000 resource maximum. So what are you going to do with this $20,000? Prepay their burial? Not very exciting. And maybe they don't need new furniture or something. You can set up this first party Medicaid payback trust, throw the $20,000 in there, and then they are seen as not having that resource any longer, though the funds remain in the trust available to assist with needs and expenses that they have. Those are just a number of examples. A first party trust can also be used if there's a substantial Medicaid payback, or excuse me, Social Security back pay. So if you have a situation where you have an appeal and the appeal runs on for several years and the back pay ends up being $25,000. I've actually worked with situations with back pays of in excess of $50,000, believe it or not, where Social Security just would not relent. And we had repeated court hearings, and it took over 3 years. It's who's left standing, who refuses to cry uncle and give in. But those large back payments can, again, create an issue. Too much for an ABLE account, you don't want to spend the money right away. So in some situations, a first party or a Medicaid payback trust is appropriate to set the funds aside. Beneficiaries must meet strict definition of disability. This can't be someone that has an occasional disorder or problem. It needs to be someone that either meets or is likely to meet the Social Security definition of disability. Trust is irrevocable, and beneficiary is generally under the age of 65. These trusts are not designed for the 80-year-old that wants to throw their money in there so they can move into a nursing home and have Medicaid pay their bills. This is for someone disabled, way too young. After a beneficiary's death, the state is reimbursed from the trust for Medicaid benefits paid during the lifetime of the beneficiary. So if there's $100,000 as an example left in the trust, and Medicaid benefits total $250,000, you can pretty well expect Medicaid to take the $100,000 that's left in the trust. So the Medicaid lien is almost like a mechanic's lien, where the mechanic is owed so much money and you can't sell the car until the Medicaid lien, or excuse me, the mechanic's lien is taken care of. So upon the death of the trust beneficiary, the family cannot receive the money until Medicaid is satisfied. And of course, with the amount of Medicaid benefits over the lifetime of the individual, it's very possible it will take the entire account balance to satisfy Medicaid. So an initial reaction is, then why bother with it? Goodness, if Medicaid's going to take it anyway. And the answer is because as long as the individual is living, funds from the trust can be spent to pay for what Medicaid can't or won't, to pay to enhance the quality of life, to pay for extra care, someone to sit with them, to help them, to be with them, to accompany them on travel, all the extra things that they need that are beyond the scope of Social Security or Medicaid. And if it conveniently does not have a lot left in it by the time the person dies, oh well, then Medicaid will have to find some other source to replenish their coffers. So, oh well. Again, I invite questions. This is the first party Medicaid trust, Medicaid payback trust screen. If you've got questions, unmute and dive in. Okay, we're going to move from first party to third party. Again, it's still special needs trust land, but a different type of trust. So dependent upon state law, the trust can be set up and funded by anyone other than the trust beneficiary. So notice the difference there. First party special needs trust funded with the individual that has the disabilities money. Third party with anyone else's money. And that's a key difference. Their own money versus everybody else's money. So third party is everybody else's, and beneficiary and or grantor or settler can be any age. The grantor settler either sets up a revocable or irrevocable standalone special needs trust, which can be funded at any time, or a testamentary special needs trust to be funded only upon their death. So different ways to set this up. So a testamentary trust means the trust is described in and designed to be set up when your will is read, when you have passed away. Standalone means it exists in the present. You don't have to die for the trust to be available, to be funded, to be used, etc. Over 20 years ago, testamentary special needs trusts were very common. That is, the trust sprang into action upon the death of the parent or parents. Today, testamentary trusts are much less common, and that's because the trust beneficiaries are living longer, and as a result of that, they're still living when grandparents are passing away, and we're finding the desire and potentially the need to fund these special needs trusts before the parents die. Because, I mean, if it has to wait until the parents die, and let's say the child was born at age 35, then shoot, if the parents are 90 at the time of death, the trust may wait until the trust beneficiary is 55 or 60 years old before it gets funded. Goodness. So the dynamics have changed, and we're now seeing much more of these trusts standalone. They can be funded at any time. In most cases, we reach out to the IRS, we get a tax ID number for the trust, we set up a trust account, and then we welcome deposits. We set up trust accounts for $500, $1,000, or $100,000. It's all over the board. You do not have to be wealthy. Do not have to have a lot of money to set up a special needs trust. And in fact, it doesn't even have to be funded at all to start with. It can wait however long until someone makes a gift or wants to leave monies to the trust. At the beneficiary's death, there is no Medicaid payback. Remember, this is third party, not first party. So if properly drafted, whoever sets up the trust gets to decide who the next beneficiary is. So it can move on to other family members, your other children, or therefore siblings of the child with special needs, whoever you say can benefit next. Does not provide for basic maintenance needs like food, clothing. The government is into that business. This is everything else. So for many of these trust beneficiaries, the government is food, shelter, and healthcare. The special needs trust is everything else. Then we have some people that are a little higher functioning, and they may not have much in the way of government benefits. In those cases, the trust may be providing the lion's share of what it takes for them to survive, to move forward.
Gordon?
Yes.
This is Tony.
Mr. Brown.
This is actually Tony Backert. I'm the uncle. So I know these have to be built upon state law. Do any of the special needs trusts ever take in consideration multiple states? So can we have a special needs trust that takes in consideration both Indiana and Kentucky law?
Okay, so for everyone's benefit, the question is, a special needs trust you set up, is it only good in one state, this type of thing? The answer is no. A special needs trust can function in more than one state. If someone moves from state to state, that doesn't mean the trust is no longer valid. Same as if you have a will. You can move out of state, and it's not that your will is no longer valid. What we generally recommend is that if one does physically move, to another state, then in time, if they're rooted there and they're going to stay there, it's a good idea to have an attorney schooled in special needs to look at in the new state, to take a look at the document. Oftentimes there's nothing to be done. Everything is fine. Also in time, these trusts have become more similar, and that's just simply because people do move around. Attorneys practice in more than one state. And so over time, there tends to be a bit of a homogenation, so to speak, among the states because of the practicality of people moving about, et cetera. The special needs trust can be set up by an attorney that reflects where the trust beneficiary lives, or the most common states are where the trust beneficiaries live, or the state of residence for the testator, meaning the person who is setting up the estate plan. I've seen it both ways. I have a family that lives in Georgia. Actually, parents live in Georgia. They have 4 children, 3 boys with special needs and a 4th without special needs. And the 3 special needs trusts for the 3 boys living in Indiana were done by an Indiana attorney and then incorporated into the Georgia estate plan by a Georgia attorney. So we see all measures of things, but I wouldn't get too bent out of shape over state lines. But suffice to say, when you set up the trust, obviously you need to work with an attorney who is licensed in the state of your residence at that point, and then simply have the document looked at if there is a permanent shift to moving out of state. And I've seen people move out of state and back into state. It's just not practical to change your estate plan every time you move. But in the long run, kind of figure out where you're going to be for the duration, where you're going to pass away, and then have someone look at it from that respective state. Great question. Thank you. Okay. That's third-party trust. And third-party special needs trusts are certainly the most common for families seeking to advocate for their loved one with special needs. And that's because the whole idea is for the individual with special needs to not have assets, but assets for their benefit to be left to a third-party trust where Medicaid will not get their hands on it. Is this making sense? A nod, a head nod or something? Anybody? Okay. All right. We don't want Medicaid to take all the money. I mean, we pay taxes for Medicaid's budget. We don't need them taking our estate as well. So, and the stakes are really high because if someone has a wrong type of trust, or shall we say, a trust that's not clear, and I'm working with a situation right now where up in northern Indiana, where someone got with an attorney and they drafted a trust, and part of the trust is screaming first party and part of it's screaming third party. And I explained to the family, I said, which direction do you think Medicaid's going to take? Do you think they're going to buy into the fact that it's a third party trust because there's some references to third party language in there? Or do you think they're going to drive a Mack truck through the fact that it's got references to first party trust language? Do you catch my drift? And these kind of mistakes can really be costly because if the trust ends up being litigated, you've got attorney expense, and then you've got the potential that a trust that may have hundreds of thousands of dollars of life insurance funds, real estate, and who knows else in it may be subject to a Medicaid payback claim. So the stakes are really high, and reality is mistakes are made. And you'd think by now they'd figure out how to get it right, and it's well-meaning. No one intends to hurt anyone. But I've been eating, sleeping, and breathing this stuff for over 20 years, and part of my role is to help keep families out of harm's way. And that's why I'm very careful as to what attorneys I work with to make sure that they're on continuing education calls and conferences and keeping their knowledge cutting edge, et cetera. At the beneficiary's death, again, no payback. And that's so critical with the third-party trust. So literally, it creates a situation where there's little downside to a well-funded trust because if there's leftover money, it stays with the family. So you park money there to take care of the family member with special needs, and what they don't use can catch up with generations to come, paying college expenses, helping homes be purchased, and all kinds of things. It's really, really exciting, and what peace of mind it gives the parents. It brings to mind a situation that became involved in, actually it involves a pool trust, which is coming up in a moment. We'll just go to pool trust next and we'll come back. But pool trusts are where you have a nonprofit like the ARC or in Kentucky, Life Plans of Kentucky. And they have a trust document and everybody plugs into that one trust or the couple of trusts that they have. And so all the funds are pooled together. So your account is accounted for separately, but all the funds are together, invested together, et cetera. So, nevertheless, you've got a pool trust, and the ARC does a wonderful job of it. They have the ARC Master Trust 1 and the ARC Master Trust 2. And so where can a trust, like a pool trust, be helpful? It can be a little less expensive, but I will tell you that among the attorneys I work with, pool trusts are not that much less expensive, and that's because I'm very careful again as to what attorneys I work with, and they're not gouging, they're not unfairly taking advantage of families, and the expense involved for the estate planning for families I work with is remarkably low compared to what is otherwise being charged out there. I remember I did a workshop in LaPorte about 3 years ago, and I had a mom of a kid with special needs come up to me afterwards, and she said, "You obviously know your stuff. I'd really like to work with you, but before I get my hopes up," she said, "I have to know what it's going to cost." And usually when someone asks that question, they've been burned, meaning, it's been a problem. And that's why they have that screening question before they get too far into something to save their time and their angst. And I said, usually when I get that question, somebody's got a story. And she said, well, sure enough. And so she had been led to believe that, $5,000 was pretty much the minimum for getting this work done. And indeed it is with some people. And so I assured her that we probably wouldn't get halfway to $5,000. And slowly a smile creeped across her face, because as the parent of a kid with special needs, I know firsthand the peace of mind in getting some plans in place and having some sense of security and a financial safety net for our loved one with special needs. So again, really careful as to who I work with. And most attorneys I work with will accept a payment plan so that the objective is to help families get to the finish line. It just is so critically important. But I got involved in this situation, and what it was really unusual. We had an individual with a disability in Kentucky, in the Lexington, Kentucky area. Beautiful area, I gotta say. Lexington, it's gorgeous. And his father was in Washington State, and his brothers were in Arizona. And so we had 3 different states involved. And as it turned out, what had happened is this gentleman had 3 boys, and one with special needs, got somewhere along the way, left in Kentucky, I think conveniently away from the rest of the family. And the father had disinherited him so that he could keep his benefits. And in this old man's final months, he took pity and had compassion for his adult son with special needs. And being old at that point himself, could not bear the thought of his son with disabilities being in his 60s or 70s, penniless, and living in a shelter. And so without the other 2 brothers' knowledge, he changed his estate plan. Well, if you think they weren't shocked when he died, oh boy. So he built into his estate plan that a sufficient amount of his estate to create a stream of income for his son with disabilities, starting at the age of 65, because of not wanting him to be old and penniless, to create a stream of income for X number of dollars per month. And unfortunately, he passed away, and the brother with special needs was only about 61 years old. Well, the way the estate was written, they couldn't close the estate until their brother with a disability turned 65, because you could not predict exactly how much money it was going to take to purchase an annuity that would create the stream of income required by the estate plan. Am I making sense? So this estate had been held open for 4 long years. And the other 2 brothers never in their wildest imagination dreamt that they would be celebrating their brother's 65th birthday. But that was the case. And so a pool trust was used because, needless to say, neither of the other brothers wanted to serve as trustee. And so we used a pool trust to purchase the annuity from the estate. Once the annuity was purchased, the stream of income created, then the remaining estate could be divided up and closed. So we certainly see pool trust used for a variety of situations, but one of the reasons is when there's no obvious family member that is either capable or willing to serve as trustee. That's one example. Another is when the funding of the trust is limited and we want the funds to last, because the ARC Trust is known to be pretty firm on limiting expenses from the trust, or what they'll pay for in order to make the trust last, et cetera. So there are a variety of reasons of why the pool trust, or perhaps the ARC pool trust, can be helpful, again, in some situations. As far as who gets the money, like in the case of the ARC Trust, at the death of the trust beneficiary, it depends upon what type of trust you have. So if it's an ARC Trust 2, Master Trust 2, in most cases, half goes to the ARC and half goes to the state. If it's an ARC Trust 1 account, which is designed to reflect more like a third-party trust, the family can specify what family members are to receive what's left in the trust at the death of the trust beneficiary. Okay, so that's pool trusts. Let's go back and pick up on qualified disability trusts now. Most people are not familiar with this, but a qualified disability trust qualifies for a tax exemption of $4,300 for 2021. Well, there's a reason that that's the first bullet point. It's to get your attention, because tax exemptions are really good, really good. So in the case of a qualified disability trust, if a special needs trust is a qualified disability trust, then it can enjoy this exemption of $4,300. What does that mean? That means if you have an investment account, you've probably seen what we call a 1099. They come usually a little earlier in the year and they get slapped on the income tax return that you may have recently filed. They reflect usually interest, dividends, and capital gains on stocks, bonds, mutual funds, exchange traded funds, etc. So in the case of a qualified disability trust, the first $4,300 is not taxed. That's really powerful. So a person can have a special needs trust and be making money in that trust with dividends, capital gains, and interest, this type of thing. Well, maybe not as much in interest these days, but you can have growth, and it can be exempt from taxation on the first $4,300. That's huge. How does a trust become eligible for qualified disability trust status? Meaning, give me the exemption. What do I got to do to get it? So the answer are several. You've got to be irrevocable. The trust has to be irrevocable. Some are, some aren't. Some that aren't can become irrevocable. So for the tax exemption, it may be worthwhile to consider changing the status of a special needs trust. Second, the trust must be established for the sole benefit of the disabled beneficiary, meaning you cannot have multiple beneficiaries. You cannot have an individual with a disability and their brother or their sister who's not disabled. This type of thing, it's got to be for the sole benefit of the disabled person. The disabled beneficiary must be under the age of 65 at the time the trust is established, and the beneficiary must have a disability that basically reflects the Social Security definition. So it's not too complicated, but if we can create a special needs trust or update a special needs trust to reflect the requirements of being a qualified disability trust, up to certain limits, it may function literally tax-free. Pretty cool.
Hey, Gordon, there's a question.
Okay.
Define irrevocable, please.
Okay, so define irrevocable. Okay. There. Is that better? Okay. So sorry. There we go. Okay, no problem. I think I'm okay now. We'll hope it stays that way. I'm not going to touch the computer. Okay, so irrevocable typically means that you have a trust that you are unable to go in and modify or change, and you can't revoke. Now, you can make limited changes if the trust document allows for that, but you can't revoke it. So what does revoking mean? Because it says irrevocable, meaning not revocable. And so for a trust to be revocable, that means the settlor, the grantor, the person that set it up can decide, I'm not doing that anymore, and take literally out of the trust what's in there. So if a mom and a dad set up a revocable third-party special needs trust, and then later decide the $5,000 they put in there, they want to use for other purposes, if the trust is revocable, they can revoke it, tear it up, take the $5,000 back out of it, and use it for something else. They can undo it. Is everybody with me? If it is irrevocable, they can't undo it. They have a legal and a fiduciary responsibility to fulfill the terms of the trust, meaning to use the funds for the benefit of the trust beneficiary. They can't on a whim decide they're going to tear it up, take the money out of it, undo it, etc. So as a result of that, the person setting up the trust for it to be a qualified disability trust needs to understand that they have made their situation a little less flexible. Does everybody see what I mean? They can't have their way with it. They can't just say, I don't want to do this anymore, take the money back out. They can make withdrawals as the trustee to use funds for the benefit of the trust beneficiary, but if it becomes inconvenient for those funds to be there for the benefit of the trust beneficiary, they can't decide to use it for themselves. I hope that helps. Okay. And this is where it's so important to take advantage of the free follow-up consultation if you've done any planning, because we need to figure out if the language in your trust says first party or third party or has a little bit of both and is confusing and may create that window for Medicaid to attempt to impose a lien. And is the trust revocable or not? Could you take advantage of the tax exemption or not? And if you can't, are there changes that could be made that would allow you to? And this is too great a burden for you to try to figure out on your own. There's just too many nuances and so forth. And it literally has taken me over 20 years to reach a point where I can grab a trust document, look at it, and evaluate it in that regard. Okay, we've got one more
Gordon?
slide. Yes.
Going back to the slide that you just flipped off of, the trust must be established for the sole benefit of the disabled beneficiary. But if that disabled beneficiary dies and there's still money in the trust, are there contingency beneficiaries at that point in time?
There are. So making it irrevocable does not in any way limit the person setting up the trust from deciding who's going to get the money upon the death of the trust beneficiary. It does not give Medicaid the opportunity to place a lien against it, absolutely not. And it does not in any way limit the settlor who sets up the trust to decide it's going to their other children, grandchildren, or whomever they choose. Did that answer? Okay, thank you. All right, second slide. Okay, we're just at 7:30. We're doing okay. Keep an eye, because I get buried in this and lose track of time. All right, the trust must be a third-party trust, and that kind of follows up on what we were just talking about, funded entirely with someone else someone else's money other than the disabled beneficiary. And as a result of it being third party, you can dictate who the remainder beneficiaries are going to be. Now, one thing to keep in mind, if the same person sets up the trust, funds the trust, and is the trustee, meaning it's a one-stop shop, one person's doing it all, then you need to involve an attorney and or CPA in the process, because it's a little more tricky, because there are fewer checks and balances, if you follow what I'm saying. And so the government wants we need to have a professional expertise involved to make certain I's are dotted and T's are crossed. All right, the trust must be for the sole benefit of the disabled beneficiary. That does not mean there cannot be a remainder beneficiary. As we said, no other person or entity can benefit from the trust during the lifetime of the disabled beneficiary. Upon death of the disabled beneficiary, the trust assets can pass to remainder beneficiaries who need not be disabled. Trust must be established and funded before the disabled individual turns 65, and the beneficiary must be disabled per the Social Security Act or receiving supplemental security income or Social Security disability insurance benefits, meaning we've got to meet that standard of disability. Let me get through the last bullet point, and then we may have another question. As most special needs trusts are funded with parents' assets, including life insurance proceeds and gifts from other family members, they can be established and treated as a qualified disability trust. This makes the special needs trust an even more valuable planning tool. Okay, and nope, I don't see any more. Okay, very good, thanks. All right. I do also want to mention something about special needs trusts as well, and then we'll get to the Miller Trust. Special needs trusts are certainly not limited to young people. Now, we did mention for someone to set up a trust of their own. And by the way, I failed to mention, let me go back. If you'll notice the second bullet point, legislation was passed at the end of 2016 that enables an individual who has capacity to set up their own first-party special needs trust. Prior to that, it had to be a parent, grandparent, or the court, this type of thing, and that's no longer the case. Now an individual, if they have capacity, can set up their own. But the point I want to make is a special needs trust can be very valuable for individuals that are mature before 65 in most cases, that have a disability, and also their parents. So think about this. Let me give you an example. And there may be less of this in this particular audience, but let's say you have a person whose disability kicks in when they're in their 30s or they're in their 40s. Maybe it's Huntington's disease, or it's ALS or Lou Gehrig's disease, or early onset Parkinson's. And the trajectory is such that it is likely that they are eventually going to need significant and full-time care that is likely to bankrupt them. Does everybody follow what I'm saying? Because health insurance is not going to help you when you simply need to be turned, you need to be pottied. You know, I'm just being frank with you. Health insurance is for remedying a situation. It is not for maintenance care where you need assistance with showering, bathing, toileting, transferring continence, or cognition issues. And so the point I'm making here is that if someone in their 30s or their 40s or even their 50s finds themselves in a disabled situation as a result of something that in their teens and 20s they would never have even imagined, you really have to be careful, because if parents plan their estate in such a way that that adult child that has a disability and it's not taken them over yet, meaning they may still be employed, but they're dealing with a progression of disability, it's sometimes unfortunate that parents would leave substantial assets in their estate to that adult individual, because those assets then may be subject to a spend down for them to qualify for Medicaid, or because they own the asset at that point, they have no choice but to place those assets in a first party special needs trust to qualify for Medicaid benefits, which then subjects those assets to the Medicaid payback for benefits over their entire lifetime. Does everybody follow what I'm saying? And so this is so often the parents that are in their 40s or 50s planning for their, young person with special needs or disability, but it's a much broader group than that. And I just want to bring that up because I've done a lot of work with the hemophilia community. And the bleeding disorders like that usually take their toll as people get into their 40s and their 50s because of microbleeds, and the joints eventually wear out. And so they have joint replacements and this type of thing, and they end up being Social Security disabled. And then as things progress, they need care. And if by the time they're 50 or in their 50s, they have inherited meaningful assets from a parent, those assets may end up being subject to a spend down or a Medicaid payback situation. And parents, even in their 70s, can do estate planning and set up a special needs trust for their 40 some odd year old or 50 some odd year old son or daughter with special needs, and therefore protect those assets for their benefit as well as other generations to come. So, oh well, one of my kind of pet projects there. All right, Miller Trust. Miller Trust have traditionally, and this came about with over 93, as you see in the first bullet point, Miller Trust have primarily in the past been used to absorb excess income that an individual has in order to be Medicaid eligible and when they needed care later in life. But the over 93 made Miller Trust, otherwise known as D4B Trust, available for our disabled individuals, our individuals with special needs. And it's really exciting. The reason it's exciting is because Miller Trusts are typically needed when the individual with a disability has some amount of employment. So this is a happy dance, meaning the need for a Miller Trust means they've got a job, they're earning some money, but their earnings may be starting to cause a problem with the overall income limits that they're subject to maintain eligibility for Medicaid and Medicaid waiver services, which is so very important as we get older and they get older, and we may reach a point where we struggle to provide all of the care that we provided seemingly effortlessly in our younger years. So how does this work? Let's look at some examples, but on our way there, irrevocable trust, it's irrevocable. It's set up to receive monthly income in excess of the $2,382 allowed to maintain disability Medicaid and Medicaid waiver services. So if you have a sibling or you have a child, probably an adult child that has the CIH waiver as an example, and it's such a prized waiver and you just could not imagine losing that waiver and the hours of care and support that you receive, or the potential that it will be helpful for supported living for them either now or in the future, then you really need to tune in here, because the Miller Trust is a way to retain that waiver despite higher levels of income. So example number one, Daniel has a special needs and is employed, earning $1,000 per month. And part of the reason that the need for these Miller Trusts is coming about is because our young people with special needs are earning monies at record rates, $9 a month, an hour, $10 a month. I see $11 and even $12 an hour. And so when you think about it, it doesn't take that much to get to $1,000 per month. So as an example, if they were working 20 hours a week, basically half time, and earning $10 an hour, then that's $200 a week. Well, in a 5-week month, you're at the $1,000. So Daniel receives $458 a month in Social Security disability income from his own wage record, and $336 a month from SSI. So his total income is $1,794 per month. So he's only working part-time, but he's got close to $1,800 a month. Earned income is under the substantial gainful activity limit that we talked about a couple of weeks ago of $1,310. And his total income at $1,794 is under the $2,382. So he's in great shape. However, in 2021, his dad retires. And his dad had a pretty good run, pretty good history of income. And so as a result of that, Daniel is eligible to draw adult child benefits off of his dad. So Daniel didn't do anything. It's his dad that retired. Daniel didn't have any control over the situation, but because his dad retired, started drawing Social Security retirement benefits, that triggered adult child benefits for Daniel and drove his Social Security checks monthly to $1,500. None of this 458 and 336 stuff. He's now getting $1,500 a month. Well, do the math. He's now at $2,500 a month with his earned income. Is this making sense to everyone? Okay. So now he's at $2,500 per month, and he is blown by the $2,382. So he's over by $108 a month. So no big deal, right? Well, not so much. He's now exceeding the requirement to maintain eligibility for disability Medicaid, and he is at risk of losing both Medicaid and waiver services. Well, his dad's retired. That's not the time his dad wants to take over and start doing the waiver services as a substitute. We need to keep the waiver in place. So in this situation, if a Miller Trust was properly set up and that 108 excess squirreled away monthly into the Miller Trust, then the government would see him as only being at the 2382, therefore maintaining eligibility for all of his government benefits. Okay, let's look at example number 2. And if you think 1,500 is ridiculously high for Social Security, absolutely not. We're seeing levels north of that, where a parent has had a six-figure income, a substantial earnings record. The adult child benefit frequently is over $1,000 per month. And then survivor benefits are even more substantial. So let's look at example number 2. Ted has special needs and both parents die in an auto accident. He works part-time and is earning $700 per month. So not quite the $1,000 a month Daniel above is working or earning. His adult child benefit, survivor benefit, is $1,800. Well, now he's at $2,500 just like Daniel. He's not earning as much, but his Social Security benefit, because it's survivor benefits, which are richer benefits, then he's got the same problem at $2,500 per month. And survivor benefits now for a parent or parents that have maxed out on Social Security retirement can be as much as $2,000 per month. So we're really talking major dollars here. But we don't want it to be at the cost of the Medicaid waiver services. So in these situations, Miller Trusts are just incredibly helpful. Now you might ask, well, what do you do with the Miller Trust? And the answer is you make withdrawals from it to pay for things you need. The funds are not unavailable, and you certainly don't want to just let it accumulate and die because, of course, since the disabled person's money went in there, there is a Medicaid lien or payback against it. So you want to spend it while you're living. So save it up, buy some bedroom furniture, go clothing shopping, go to Disney World when they open again, take a cruise, enjoy it. So it just has to run through the Miller Trust in order to meet the guidelines. This is really powerful, I got to tell you, because we've got more and more of our young people working and their earnings are climbing up. And it is the combination of earned income and drawing benefits off of the parent that are driving people past the 2382. There's just no cause to lose Medicaid over that. Questions, because we're going to move away from the different types of special needs trusts. So questions about the special needs trust in general. I hope that it's been something new for everyone, because that's my intent, to bring new and fresh information to you. I just get so excited about this because of how we can help and the difference that we can make in the tools that are available to us. It is amazing. So
all right, Gordon, this is Ann Pence. I do have a question. So my son Xavier does work part-time, and then he also still receives SSI, and then he's also on the waiver. So how much money could we put in per month for the Miller Trust? Like, would that be his whole work paycheck that would have to go directly into that account?
So generally what you do is you total up his total monthly income. Now for many, it's simply their gross income and their total Social Security benefits. Now, Social Security benefits, you have to count SSI as well as SSDI, all Social Security benefits, all earned income, and make sure that it's gross. It's what would be considered Medicare wages on the pay stub or on the W-2. You can't discount it for monies put into a 401k. It's the gross income. And then you add all that up, and then you subtract for 2021, $2,382. And if you have money left, that's what has to go into the ABLE. So like 2,500 less 2,382 meant there was an extra 108 that would have to go into the ABLE account. And it's month by month. So if one's wages, because of different hours they work, or whether there's 2 paychecks or 3 and it's bi-weekly, or 4 paychecks or 5 because it's weekly, or this type of thing, you just have to figure it out, and the extent to which the total income exceeds the 2,382, that's what has to go into the Miller Trust. Now, let me mention something though, for those of you who have children that are working, a fair amount, please understand that you have to keep an eye on the 1310. Right there in example 1, that's why I mentioned it. You got to keep your eye on 1310, because there is no forgiveness for going over 1310 repeatedly. That's the SGA limit. And that is the income limit for earned income to maintain eligibility for Social Security disability off of their own record, as well as to draw off of a parent. And you don't want to poison the well, because we've already said drawing off of a parent could be worth $1,500 or more per month for life with cost of living increases. So make sure the earned income side stays under that 1310. Did that help, Ann?
Yes, thank you.
And that's why if earned income stays under 1310, they won't have typically a large enough Social Security benefit when added to that to take them over the 2,382. It usually takes that bigger benefit they're drawing off of a parent to drive them north of the 2,382. Okay, responsibilities, family members, trustee, medical, social worker, all teaming to help provide for and take care of the individual with special needs. So methods for funding the special needs trust are what we want to cover next. So gifting, lump sum. If someone has a checkbook and they're willing to write a check, let's go for it. We'll get a tax ID number for the trust. We'll set up a trust account, and we welcome deposits. The funds can be invested in mutual funds, exchange traded funds, and grow. And we've had a lot of trusts really grow, especially in recent years. It's been wonderful. Life insurance via a beneficiary, meaning it is possible to list a special needs trust as the beneficiary of life insurance, also for retirement funds. And the Secure Act that passed last year, well, it said that a non-spouse beneficiary of an IRA or 401k has to take it all in 10 years. A non-spouse has to take it all in 10 years, but they made an exception for a disability trust. So we've got great news, because if a special needs trust is the beneficiary of an IRA or a 401k or a 403b, a simple, a SEP, et cetera, that trust beneficiary has the ability to take distributions, RMDs, required minimum distributions, over the trust beneficiary's lifetime. They are not limited to the 10 years as is other non-spouse beneficiaries. Did everybody catch that? That's big. You got $200,000 or $300,000 in a retirement account. Realize if that goes to your sons or your daughters, they're going to have to take it all and pay taxes on it in 10 years. If it goes to a special needs trust, that trust beneficiary can stretch it out over their lifetime, which could be 20, 30 or more years. That's huge. You combine that with it being a qualified disability trust. Hello. Not a lot of places to run for tax cover these days, but fortunately we're getting a bone thrown at us here and there in the special needs community, and I could not be more thrilled. Investment accounts via transfer on death, and CDs via POD or payable on death. You can also leave property, like rental property. You got a rental house and you want to leave it to the special needs trust. It's a good investment, not a problem. Okay, so caregivers, grandparents.
Quick question on if you had somebody that set up a special needs trust and wrote a check just to fund it. And once again, I'm thinking for my niece, if we set up something for our special needs, for our niece for special needs trust, then our kids could be the contingency beneficiaries of that trust and get a stretch out over Cindy's lifetime at her passing.
Okay, so to answer the question, at the time of death, if the special needs trust is the beneficiary, then the disabled individual who is the beneficiary of the trust can start receiving RMDs based on their life expectancy. Upon their death, the remainder trust beneficiary has to receive it in 10 years.
Okay, all right.
But if the trust beneficiary lives a long time, then at a slow pace, that's going to be converted from a pre-tax to an after-tax asset.
And the money that was put in the trust, would that go against our gifting limits, or because we're giving it for her benefit, would that bypass the gifting?
Okay, all right, great question. And the answer to that question, I'm not sure we cover it here. No. Okay, so the answer to the question is each person under current tax law has the ability to gift up to $15,000 per person receiving, per person giving. So if, as an example, you and the young person sitting next to you there were to gift something together, then the two of you together could gift $30,000, 15 each. Are you with me so far? Now, that's per trust beneficiary. So you actually can, between the two of you, give $30,000 to a trust that has a special needs trust beneficiary. If you want to go more than that, then there are some arrangements where you can actually count the remainder beneficiaries, which may be other, I don't know, your children or other individuals that you were mentioning a moment ago, and create a multiplier effect where, let's say, there is one single trust beneficiary, and then there are 3 remainder beneficiaries upon their death. Are you with me so far? Okay, the potential exists that you could gift $120,000 a year. That is, count all 4, the primary and the residual beneficiaries for gifting purposes. But we need to talk about it in the individual consultation because we're starting to get into a little bit of the tall weeds, and I would need to know more about your situation for specific advising. But the potential is incredible, to say the least. Annual contributions, monthly contributions, everything is allowed. I've got one family I think of in the Lexington, Kentucky area where I think we've got every grandparent and every parent putting money in. There's like 6 people putting in $50 a month, so we've got like $300 a month coming into that trust, and the thing's up to 20 grand. It's amazing. Life insurance, you can set it up where the life insurance policy by way of beneficiary goes to the trust. You can also have the trust own the life insurance policy. And if the trust is irrevocable, back to that irrevocable issue, and owns the policy, then it can also collect the funds at the death of the insured, and then the policy is not considered a part of the estate of the insured. Well, where that can be helpful is the potential exists, there's saber rattling in Washington, D.C., that the high unified tax credit that currently allows many millions of dollars to be passed free of federal estate taxes may be coming down. And so it may be valuable to not have large life insurance policies included in one's estate. So a variety of options for dealing with life insurance. Different types of life insurance. We work with all these: term, universal life, permanent life, and then there's second to die. And second to die is by far the most popular funding, guaranteed and dedicated funding source for special needs trust for 2 parents. Survivorship life insures 2 parents together under a single coverage, or grandparents or aunts or uncles or whomever, 2 individuals insured together. It provides a benefit upon the death of the second person. And because of that, the premiums are significantly discounted. And so it is absolutely incredible. For relatively small premiums, the amount of guaranteed benefit on a tax-free basis we can guarantee for a special needs trust. Really exciting. I have access to practically every company in the industry that provides it. So we just do so much work in this area. But you know, for a young family, literally for less than $100 a month, you could guarantee $250,000 for the special needs trust. I mean, it's just incredible. Ability to leverage dollars available now and in the future. Life insurance proceeds, again, tax-free to a special needs trust could be a great source. helps protect in the event the parents run out of money by the time they die on their own care or meeting the needs of their child with disabilities. Life insurance guarantees fresh funds to see that the trust is funded. Okay. On the left is what the government does. On the right is the everything else that the Special Needs Trust does. So if you're curious, goodness, with government benefits, what do we need with a trust? And here you go. The government's on the left, everything else is on the right, and there is a lot of everything else. Things that people enjoy and look forward to, whether it's Netflix, a cell phone, travel, vacations, entertainment, it just on and on. And a corporate trustee is available. So you have an attorney that can serve as a trustee. You can have an institutional trustee. You as parent or parents can be the trustee. Grandparents that set up the trust can be a trustee. Lots of options. We managed to get it done almost every time. So there's a process. There are 3 steps to moving through the process. You gather up various items like what's going to fund the trust, government benefits, kind of frame the issue, work with an attorney to draft and get the trust set up, or use a pool trust if appropriate. And then once it's executed, we start setting up financial instruments in the name of the trust, arrange for beneficiaries for when the trust will be funded and so forth. And as we get close to wrapping up today, it's my role to understand the financial needs of families and individuals with special needs, provide the expertise in analyzing needs, government benefits, the legal, the financial, government benefits, all aspects of the special needs planning process. I am not alone. Jamie's on this evening. We also have David Gray and Trevor Swearingen. So we are a team, and we work with literally thousands of families throughout the state of Indiana. I think we do more of this than anyone else out there. Okay, so that's my information with font big enough where you don't even need your readers. Oh, well, that was an attempt at humor. About the time my wife says, don't quit your day job. Okay, we have just a couple of minutes left for any additional questions. So anything anyone would like to ask. And I certainly hope you've enjoyed the deep dive into special needs trusts this evening. I just love them. I'm so thankful for them. It's a wonderful thing Congress did in making these available for us to help provide for a loved one. The follow-up free follow-up consultation is as easy as calling the office or emailing. My email is there. Also, Jamie's email was put in the chat early on, and there's absolutely no cost. Once a meeting is scheduled in person or by Zoom, then Jamie will be faithful in sending out pre-meeting material to you so that you have everything that you need to prepare for our time together so that we get the most out of that. Any remaining questions, please? Anything about anything covered in all 3 sessions? Well, in light of that, again, I encourage you to let the leadership know if this has been helpful and if we may want to revisit this next year with updated and new information, because a lot of what we covered the last 3 weeks is recent. Then please let them know, because it's a joy of mine to be able to share and be helpful to you. Look forward to seeing many of you for your free follow-up consultation. I now show it as 8 o'clock right on the button. And again, thank you, Francie, for being so faithful throughout these several weeks. Appreciate that, and everyone that joined in and contributed. God bless. Take care.
Thank you, Gordon.
Thanks,
You're very
Gordon.
welcome. You're welcome.